The archivist found the recording by accident. That was the detail no one talked about afterward. Not the battle, not the casualties, not the treaty that rewrote the borders of 4 star systems. What nobody discussed was that the most consequential document in Conclave history had been misfiled under maintenance logs, tucked between a humidity report and a requisition form for replacement filtration membranes, sitting unread in a tertiary archive node on a station that had been scheduled for decommissioning. It had been sitting there for 11 years. Vessel Archivist Sen of the Threnody Continuance pulled it from the queue because the file size was wrong. Maintenance logs ran between 4 and 12 kilobytes. This one was 340 gigabytes. Dense, compressed, tagged with a timestamp that, when she converted it to the standard Conclave calendar, placed its creation at the exact moment the 14th Reclamation Fleet had gone silent. She almost flagged it as corrupted data and moved on. Instead, she opened it. What she heard first, before the visuals resolved, before the translation matrix finished calibrating, was a sound she didn't have a word for. Not in Threnody, not in any of the 11 languages she was certified to archive. It took her 3 full minutes of sitting motionless at her terminal before she realized what it was. It was a human being singing. The translation matrix finished its calibration and presented her with 340 gigabytes of unbroken documentation. Sensor logs, internal communication records, medical telemetry, tactical overlays, and at the center of all of it, unedited footage from 17 different recording sources aboard a single human vessel, a frigate designated in Conclave records as negligible combat asset, classification, expendable screening element. The frigate's name, in human script that the matrix rendered phonetically, was the Unbroken Meridian. Sen had studied the 14th Reclamation Campaign the way all Threnody archivists studied it, as a cautionary administrative record. 17 Conclave fleets had been deployed to reestablish territorial sovereignty over a cluster of 9 systems the humans had, through a combination of diplomatic stalling and inexplicable persistence, refused to evacuate. The campaign had lasted 8 months. It had ended without the humans evacuating. The Conclave had withdrawn instead, citing operational complexity in 17 separate official documents, none of which explained what operational complexity actually meant. Nobody had ever explained what operational complexity actually meant. Sen began watching the footage. By the 3rd hour, she had stopped taking archival notes. By the 6th hour, she had locked her terminal, set her status to restricted, and submitted a priority access request to the Conclave's sealed historical records, the category reserved for events the Conclave had officially decided were not constructive to broader understanding. It took 14 minutes for the request to be denied. It took her another 6 minutes to realize that the denial itself was the 3rd thing about this file that didn't fit. The first was the file size. The second was the singing. The third was that someone had already tried to bury this once. Sen had been an archivist for 31 years. She had processed records of 17 wars, 4 extinction events, and 1 incident of first contact so badly mismanaged that an entire species had chosen voluntary hibernation rather than continue communicating with the Conclave. She was not, by her own assessment, easily disturbed. She began at the beginning of the footage. The actual beginning, not where the Conclave's campaign records started, but 11 months earlier, before the 14th Reclamation Fleet had even been assembled, back when the cluster of 9 systems was still classified as a * negotiation zone, and the humans were still sending diplomats. What she found in those 11 months changed the shape of everything that came after. The first mystery wasn't the singing. The singing had an explanation, eventually a terrible one, but an explanation. The first mystery was the dates. According to Conclave records, The humans had first been formally notified of territorial reassignment for the 9-system cluster on the 14th of consolidation, year 1204. According to the footage Sen was now watching, footage pulled from human communications logs that the Matrix confirmed were unedited. The humans had received a second notification on that same date. Not a copy of the first, a different notification from a different sender. The sender's designation had been partially corrupted, but the Matrix reconstructed enough to identify the communication channel: internal conclave administrative relay, high clearance, the kind used between Fleet Command and senior conclave ministers. Someone inside the conclave had warned the humans the reassignment was coming. Not during negotiations, not as part of any official process. 7 weeks before the formal notification, while the conclave was still internally debating whether to even pursue the reassignment, someone had told the humans. Sen sat with that for a moment. Then she kept watching. The human officer whose voice dominated the early footage was a woman named Commander Yale Davin. She appeared first in a briefing room that the Meridian's internal cameras recorded with a fisheye distortion that made the edges of the frame look slightly warped, like everything in the room was leaning inward toward her. She was not physically imposing. The conclave's initial assessment files, which Sen had read during her training as a standard case study in alien morphology misinterpretation, had categorized humans as moderate-threat biological entities: bilateral symmetry, medium mass, no natural armor, limited sensory range, short lifespan. The original Conclave Xenobiology report had devoted 3 pages to explaining why humans were unlikely to be a significant military factor, and 1 sentence to the caveat that their behavioral volatility represented a minor wildcard. 1 sentence. Commander Davin didn't look like a wildcard. She looked tired. She was standing at the head of a briefing table with 14 other humans, and she was explaining in a calm voice, with the particular flatness of someone who has been awake too long and has chosen functionality over feeling, what the conclave's notification actually meant. "They're not offering us relocation," she said. "The language looks like relocation. It isn't. The systems they're offering us instead have no established infrastructure, no viable agricultural zones, and projected habitability assessments that assume technological support we don't currently have." She paused. "They're offering us a place to die slowly instead of quickly." One of the other humans, a younger man with a bandage along his left jaw that Sen's Matrix identified as a recently healed laceration, said, "So what do we do?" Davin looked at him for a moment. "We don't leave," she said. "They have 17 fleets." "I know, Commander." "I know," she said again, and the way she said it the second time was different. Not heavier, not louder. It was quieter, actually, and that quietness was the thing that made Sen stop the footage and sit in absolute stillness for almost a full minute before she understood why it had affected her. Commander Davin wasn't afraid. She wasn't performing courage. Either Sen had archived enough military records to recognize performance. This was something else. Something the Threnodi didn't have a precise word for, though they had several words for its absence. Davin knew what was coming. She understood the numbers, and the numbers didn't change what she was going to do. Sen flagged this moment in the footage and moved on. She didn't yet know what she was flagging it for. She would understand later. The 14th Reclamation Fleet arrived at the outer boundary of the 9-system cluster 63 days after the formal notification expired, and the humans had, in the phrasing of the official conclave dispatch, failed to achieve compliance. The fleet was commanded by High Executor Ravik Tel of the Marenthas Combine, a species whose military culture the conclave had come to rely on for precisely this kind of operation. The Marenthas had fought 11 reclamation campaigns in 200 years and won all 11. Their tactical doctrine was straightforward: overwhelming force, demonstrated early, followed by a quarantine perimeter that made resistance materially impossible. It worked because it was rational. Any species that assessed the situation accurately would surrender. Any species that didn't assess accurately would be corrected by the first engagement. After that, they would surrender. High Executor Tell's first communication to the human cluster was, by conclave standards, generous. He offered them an additional 30 days to begin evacuation. He transmitted full specifications of his fleet capacity as a demonstration of good faith, meaning, as a demonstration that resistance was futile. The humans responded in 6 hours. Their response was a formal acknowledgement of receipt. That was all. No counterproposal, no surrender timetable, no request for negotiation. They confirmed in 11 words that they had received the message. Tell recorded his reaction in his personal command log, which was also in Sen's archive. "The humans either do not understand the implications," he wrote, "or they are attempting to create the appearance of strategic ambiguity. Either interpretation confirms our assessment. They are not prepared for the engagement ahead." He was wrong, but not in the way he thought. The Meridian was stationed at the far edge of the cluster, at a position the humans called the mouth, the narrowest navigational choke point between two dense debris fields that any fleet entering the cluster from the standard approach vector would have to pass through. It was not a particularly defensible position in conventional terms. The ship was too small to block the lane, too lightly armed to threaten capital vessels. Sen had initially struggled to understand why the asterisk Meridian was there at all. She found the answer in a crew manifest addendum that had been filed, once again, in entirely the wrong location, this time under medical supplementals. The asterisk Meridian's asterisk crew had volunteered, not been assigned. Every one of the 340 individuals aboard had submitted a written request to be positioned at the mouth. The manifest addendum contained the confirmation codes for each request. It also contained a field that Sen had never seen in a military manifest before, a field that the human administrative system apparently required for this category of assignment, labeled simply, "Acknowledgement of Expected Outcome." All 340 had signed it. Sen translated the field header 3 times to make sure she had it right. She did. The humans at the mouth knew what the expected outcome of their position was. They had signed a document confirming they understood it. They had asked to be there anyway. This was the second major mystery. Not what they were going to do, she could see, from the tactical overlays, approximately what they were going to do. The mystery was asterisk Y. What kind of calculation led 340 individuals to sign a form confirming their own expected deaths and then request assignment to that position? Sen didn't have an answer yet. She kept watching. The Marintha's fleet entered the cluster on the 7th of enforcement, year 1205. Tell's approach vector was, as the humans had apparently anticipated, directly through the mouth. The first thing his fleet encountered was not weapons fire. It was music. The Meridian was broadcasting on all standard conclave communication frequencies. Not a distress signal, not a challenge, not a surrender request. Music. Specifically, the same piece of music Sen had heard at the very beginning of the footage, the sound she hadn't had a word for. The Matrix had since provided a translation of the song's origin data. It was described in the human records as a traditional lament from the northern coast of a continental region on the human homeworld. It was approximately 600 years old. Tell's communication officer flagged it as a malfunction. Tell himself in his command log described it as a psychological tactic of unclear intent, possibly intended to create uncertainty about the crew's mental status. He made a note to have his xenopsychology team assess it after the engagement. The asterisk Meridian held its position. Tell ordered a formation advance. What happened in the next 4 hours was documented in 17 simultaneous streams of footage, sensor logs registering everything from gravitational variance to internal hull temperature, and the unedited audio of Commander Davin's bridge. And even with all of that data, it took Sen nearly 2 additional hours of replaying specific segments before she fully understood what she was watching. It wasn't a battle. It was not, in any framework Sen had ever used to categorize military engagements, a battle. She wasn't sure there was a word for what it was. The Meridian didn't try to destroy Tel's fleet. It didn't try to hold the mouth in any conventional sense. What it did, what Davin had clearly planned, down to a level of preparation that must have begun the moment the formal notification had arrived, was make the passage through the mouth cost asterisk something. Every system on the asterisk meridian had been modified. Sen found the engineering logs, again misfiled, this time under asterisk catering inventory asterisk, a detail that briefly made her question her own sanity before she accepted it as a pattern, and they described 11 weeks of continuous modification work. The crew had stripped the ship of everything non-essential, living quarters reduced to emergency minimums, medical bay expanded to 4 times standard capacity. Weapon systems rerouted to draw from the life support reserves, which were themselves rerouted to draw from the crew's personal power allocation. The crew had, for the last 6 weeks of preparation, been living in 60% standard atmospheric pressure and 40% standard thermal regulation to bank energy reserves. For 6 weeks, they had been slowly suffocating and slowly freezing, so that the ship would have enough power to do what Davin intended. "It's cold," the young man with the healed jaw Sen found his name in the manifest, Ensign Piotr Vasek, said in the footage about 3 weeks into the modification period. He wasn't complaining, he was just saying it. Davin was at the engineering console reviewing power allocation. She didn't look up. Yep. "How cold is it supposed to get?" "Colder." A pause. "Okay," Vasek said. That was the entire exchange. Sen watched it twice. When the Marenthes fleet entered the mouth, the asterisk meridian did something Tel's tactical system had no existing classification for. It didn't fire. It didn't maneuver defensively. It released, from 8 modified external ports that had originally been navigational sensor arrays, a dispersal pattern of dense metallic particulate. Essentially, a cloud of finely milled debris, launched in a specific geometric arrangement that the asterisk meridian's asterisk remaining navigational AI had calculated over the previous 43 days. To a Marenthes fire control system, looking at the particulate cloud through standard targeting sensors, the cloud looked like nothing. It was debris. It was below weapon engagement threshold. What it actually was, as Sen eventually pieced together from the navigational logs, was an asterisk lens. Specifically, at the precise density and dispersion pattern Davin had calculated, the particulate cloud was electromagnetically transparent to the asterisk meridian's asterisk own sensor frequencies, but opaque, in a very specific band, to the targeting frequencies the Marenthes fleet used to acquire and track fast-moving objects. The Meridian could see through the cloud. The Marenthes fleet, for approximately 6 minutes, could not accurately track anything on the other side of it. 6 minutes was not a long time. In those 6 minutes, the asterisk Meridian fired everything it had. Not at the capital ships, not at the fleet's military power. Davin fired at the fleet's asterisk navigation relays, the small, almost invisible support vessels that Marenthes doctrine positioned at fixed geometric coordinates to maintain fleet coherence through a choke point. Without them, a fleet that size moving through a narrow debris corridor had to slow down, reorient, re-establish independent navigational calculation for each vessel. It didn't destroy anything. It didn't kill anyone. It made 19 capital ships, for approximately 4 hours, unable to safely move faster than 12% standard velocity through the mouth, without risking collision with the debris fields. 4 hours. Tell's first instinct was fury. His command log from this period shifted from the careful, formal phrasing of a senior officer to something shorter and harder. The human vessel employed a particulate dispersal navigational blind. Deceptive, effective, temporary. We will be through the mouth by 1400 hours. The screening vessel will be destroyed. He was right about 1400 hours. He was also right that the asterisk meridian would be destroyed. What he did not account for, what no conclave tactical assessment had ever raised as a possibility, was that the asterisk meridian's asterisk crew in those 4 hours had not been trying to stop the fleet. They had been transmitting. Everything, the cloud dispersal pattern, the targeting frequency vulnerability, the navigation relay positions, the fleet formation data that 4 hours of close sensor contact had compiled, all of it in compressed burst transmissions to 7 other human vessels positioned throughout the cluster. The Meridian was not a warship. It had never been a warship. It was a sensor platform and a transmission relay, and it had just spent 4 hours at point-blank range with the largest military force the Conclave had ever sent to the cluster, learning everything it could, and it had gotten every bit of that data out before Tell's fleet finished crossing the mouth and reduced it to debris. Sen stopped the footage. She sat for a long time. She had thought she understood the asterisk meridian's asterisk purpose. She had thought the mystery was asterisk, why asterisk 340 people had volunteered for a near-certain death. She now understood that wasn't the mystery at all. She had been asking the wrong question. The mystery wasn't why they had volunteered to die. The mystery was what 340 people had been willing to die asterisk to accomplish. And sitting in her archive station, with 280 gigabytes of footage still to watch, Sen had the sudden, visceral, deeply unsettling sensation that she was only now beginning to understand what the 14th reclamation campaign had actually been. The 6 remaining hours of the asterisk meridian's asterisk footage were from Davin's bridge. Sen had expected silence, or fear, or the particular tight-jawed, controlled professionalism she'd seen in other military archives during final engagements. Davin's crew was talking, not about the incoming fire, not about the damage cascading through the hull systems. They were talking the way people talk when they are doing something ordinary, cross-conversations, interjections, someone 2 consoles over arguing about whether a calculation was off by a factor or a decimal. Vasek was reading something aloud from a personal device to the officer next to him, something that made the officer laugh once, short and genuine, before turning back to her station. "Commander," the navigation officer said, at approximately 40 minutes before the final engagement, "they've cleared the mouth." "I know. We could still." "No." Another pause. "The transmissions went through." "All of them," Davin said. She pulled up something on the central display that Sen's matrix identified as a navigational chart of all 9 systems. Tiny indicators scattered across the cluster. Every packet. They've got everything we collected. "So we're done." Davin looked at the chart for a moment. "We did what we came to do." "Yeah," Vasek from somewhere off camera. "Yeah, we did." The singing started a few minutes later, not from speakers, from the crew. Sen could see 3 of them in frame at their stations, voices low, the same piece of music that had been broadcast at the fleet's arrival. It spread, station to station, not all at once, but the way warmth spreads through a cold room gradually until the bridge was full of it. The final sensor reading, logged automatically by the asterisk meridian's asterisk archive system 2 minutes before the transmission cut out, showed the Marintha's fleet at 22% effective formation capacity, 4 navigational relays destroyed, 11 capital vessels operating on degraded targeting, and the particulate cloud still active across the mouth, thinning now but still present. The *Meridian's last recorded action was a single short-range broadcast on the emergency channel, directed at the approaching fleet. The Matrix translated it as 6 words. "The cluster knows you are coming." Tel's campaign proceeded. Sen had expected that, when she reached the Conclave's own records of the following 7 months, they would diverge sharply from the human footage. She had expected the kind of discrepancy that archivists sometimes found between official histories and primary sources, not because the Conclave falsified records, but because official histories naturally compressed and rationalized and selected. What she found was something she had not expected. The Conclave's own records agreed, almost precisely, with what the human footage showed. The strategic situation deteriorated. 7 months of engagement across 9 systems, against human forces that consistently operated below expected combat thresholds in direct engagement and consistently exceeded expected thresholds in every other category. They moved faster than the Conclave expected. They made decisions faster. They adapted their tactics between engagements faster than the fleet's own analysis systems could model. Every time Tel's command believed it had identified a human pattern, the pattern changed. Every time a Conclave force believed it had isolated a human position, the position turned out to be a relay or a decoy or an empty shell from which the humans had already transmitted everything worth transmitting and moved. The Conclave had sent 17 fleets to remove humans from 9 systems. What they had actually done was send 17 fleets into a 9-system sensor network that the humans had been building and calibrating from the moment the first notification had arrived. From the moment, Sen now realized that whoever had sent that early warning from inside the Conclave had given them the time to prepare. Tel's final command log entry before withdrawal was 11 words long. "We cannot take what they have already decided costs too much to give." Sen found the 4th mystery on her 72nd hour of review, when she finally reached the medical telemetry logs. These she had almost skipped. Telemetry logs were rarely cinematically significant. They were numbers, physiological data streams. She had flagged them for secondary processing. She read them on an impulse she later couldn't fully explain. The Meridian's crew, during the final 6 weeks of preparation, during the cold, the reduced pressure, the modified power allocation, had continued performing at full operational effectiveness. That wasn't remarkable in itself. Humans were documented as having significant physiological resilience. What was remarkable was the medical AI's notation in week 4 of the preparation period. It had flagged 11 crew members for elevated cortisol readings and begun preparing a recommendation for reduced duty rotation, as per standard Conclave medical protocol. Protocols the humans had apparently been using as their baseline medical system at the time, absorbed from early Conclave medical exchanges. Commander Davin had manually overridden the recommendation. The medical AI had logged a second flag 2 days later, overridden. The medical AI had submitted a formal notation at week 5, citing crew physiological stress indicators exceeding sustainable operational threshold. Davin had responded to the formal notation with a written note of her own, added directly to the medical log. 3 lines. Sen read them 3 times. "They know I told them. They chose to continue. This is not an operational calculation. This is a different kind of decision entirely. Log it and let them keep working." The medical AI, operating on the logic that a senior officer overrides superseded automated recommendations, had logged it. "And let them keep working." The 5th mystery arrived not from the footage, but from a document Sen found in the sealed records she had been denied access to specifically, but the denial had included a reference code for the sealed category, and Threnody archivists were very good at inference. The reference code indicated that the sealed records contained testimony. Specifically, testimony given by High Executor Tell himself to the Conclave's Strategic Review Council in a closed session 39 days after the withdrawal. Sen couldn't access the testimony itself, but she could access the Review Council's official response, which was itself only partially redacted, and which contained something she recognized instantly as a quotation, the kind of specific phrasing that bureaucratic documents preserved when they were reacting to language too notable to paraphrase. The Review Council's response read, in response to the executor's characterization of human combatant psychology as, quote, not a survivable threat category, but an incompatible operational axiom. The Council notes that this assessment, while understandable given the circumstances, cannot be formalized without significant implications for Conclave doctrine regarding species-level threat classification. Sen read that 3 times. Not a survivable threat category, an incompatible operational axiom. Tell had stood in front of the Conclave's senior military council after commanding 17 fleets after a career of 11 consecutive successful campaigns, and said, on the record, that humans didn't represent a threat they could survive or destroy or outlast. They represented an asterisk way of operating that the Conclave's entire military framework was not built to counter. And the Council had redacted it, and misfiled it, and hoped no one would find it. She was in the final sections of the footage now, the last 2 hours, after the asterisk meridian was gone, following the 7 other human vessels through the cluster engagement. The data was harder to follow here, more fragmented, more simultaneous, less structured around a single figure like Davin, but one moment stopped Sen so completely that she remained motionless for nearly 4 minutes. There was a transmission between 2 human officers, brief, captured in the edge of a sensor log from a vessel identified as Survey Platform Corona. One voice she didn't recognize. The other she did, because she had been listening to it for 3 days. Davin was alive. Not on the asterisk meridian, the meridian was gone by this point, but the transmission timestamp was 14 hours after the asterisk meridian's asterisk last sensor reading. The matrix confirmed. The voice patterns matched, within 98.7% confidence. Sen had assumed Davin was dead. The footage had implied it. The record had been filed as if everyone aboard the asterisk meridian had been lost. Sen had watched 340 people sign a document acknowledging their expected deaths and had concluded the expected deaths had occurred. She had been wrong. She didn't know yet how many of them had made it off. She didn't know by what method or at what cost. She didn't know what it meant that this, too, had been buried in a misfiled archive 11 years ago. But she understood, with a clarity that arrived the way cold water arrives all at once, that the humans had signed a document acknowledging their asterisk expected asterisk deaths, not their asterisk guaranteed asterisk deaths. They had signed a form that said they understood it might kill them, not one that said they had given up. There was a difference, a significant, specific, paradigm-dissolving difference, and the Conclave's entire assessment of the 14th Reclamation Campaign, the entire official record, the 17 documents citing operational complexity, the sealed testimony, the redacted quotation, had been built on the assumption that the asterisk meridian's asterisk crew had gone to the mouth to die. They hadn't. They had gone to the mouth to asterisk work. They had planned and prepared and modified their ship and frozen and slowly suffocated for 6 weeks and sung as the weapons came for them, and some of them at least had walked out of it. The question that had opened the whole archive, what had the humans done? What had they actually done? Why did the Conclave bury it? Finally had an answer that Sen could hold in both hands, though it was heavier than she'd imagined. The Conclave hadn't buried the 14th Reclamation Campaign because the humans had done something terrible. They had buried it because the humans had demonstrated something the Conclave didn't know how to incorporate into its model of how rational beings operated. Not superior technology, not overwhelming force, not strategic genius. Even the particulate cloud trick was clever, but clever was something the Conclave could categorize and counter. What the Conclave couldn't categorize was this. 340 people who understood they might die, signed a form saying they understood it, spent 6 weeks making themselves cold and breathless, and exhausted for a purpose larger than their own survival, sang as the end came, and then some of them walked out the other side and kept working. You couldn't build a doctrine against that. You couldn't model it. You couldn't threaten it with force because it had already accounted for force and decided the work was worth the cost. Tell had been right. It wasn't a survivable threat. It wasn't a threat at all in the conventional sense. It was something the Conclave had, in 31 years of archivist training and 17 wars of documented history and 4 extinction events, and 1 catastrophically mismanaged first contact, never prepared Sen to name. She filed her report at the end of her 79th hour of review. She filed it correctly. She cross-referenced every source, verified every timestamp, included the translation matrix confidence intervals, attached the full 340 gigabyte archive with corrected filing coordinates. She did everything an archivist was supposed to do. She flagged the irregularities in the access denial. She noted the sealed testimony. She cited the medical log override. She did not recommend any particular course of action. That wasn't her function. She did include, at the end of the report, 1 uncharacteristic addition, a personal notation, the kind archivists were technically permitted to make but rarely did. It was not analysis. It was not recommendation. It was 3 sentences because that seemed to be the appropriate length for something this specific. This archive was not buried because it contained a human victory. It was buried because it contained evidence that human beings are capable of choosing what they are willing to pay before they know what they will be asked to pay. The Conclave has no doctrine for a species that has already made its peace with every price. 11 months after Sen filed her report, the Conclave quietly reclassified the human cluster systems as asterisk permanently non-reclamation eligible. No explanation was given. No official acknowledgement of the change was made. In the final frames of the asterisk Meridian's asterisk footage, a fragment Sen had almost missed, 8 seconds of stabilized image from an external hull camera pointing away from the Marenthes fleet, pointing toward the deep cluster interior. There was nothing remarkable. Stars, debris field edge, empty navigational space. And somewhere in the middle distance, barely resolvable at the camera's maximum magnification, a light. Moving. The asterisk Meridian had been able to see it. Sen zoomed the matrix enhancement as far as it would go. The light resolved, after 3 processing passes, into the rough silhouette of something small and fast, moving away from the debris field on a vector that would clear the cluster's outer boundary in approximately 6 hours. An escape pod. One of many, the manifest had noted in an appendix Sen found only now, in the 79th hour, because it had been filed, of course. Somewhere it was never supposed to be found. The asterisk Meridian hadn't planned for victory. It hadn't planned for defeat. It had planned for the work, and planned for the cost, and then made room in the plan for whatever came after, because the people aboard it had understood something about continuation that the Conclave had spent 11 years trying not to write down. The work didn't stop when the ship did. Outside the archive station's viewport, the stars were the same stars they had always been. They looked different now. Sen didn't know how to explain that either, how a set of facts, once rearranged into truth, made the familiar look foreign. She was an archivist. She dealt in records, not in feelings. She had a word for almost everything. She didn't have a word for the specific fear of realizing you have been measuring the wrong thing all along. But she suspected the humans would have had one.